Ash-Mohammed. What up, listeners, and welcome to the Gasian podcast, where we interview performers, writers, and entertainers about their craft while exploring their life experiences that have shaped them as artists. I'm your host, Vong Shou, official spokesperson for Gay Super Cute Asians. And I'm super excited about our guest today, stand-up comedian Brandon Ash-Mohammed, who just released his first comedy album, Capricornication. Thank you so much for being part of the show, Brandon.
Thank you for having me. Yay.
Well, there's a lot of excitement right now around your album. I've just been seeing you everywhere, with your whirlwind press tour with Canadian Press, CBC, Metro Morning,
Yeah.
Breakfast Television on City TV, E-Talk, also some very prominent podcasts like Homophilia, Chosen Family Podcast, and so on and so on. And also within the stand-up comedy community, because we share a lot of contacts. Like, it's just been trending everywhere. You have such support from the community.
Yeah.
Everybody's very excited. I basically spent, earlier today listening to your album, and it really just captures your essence. So, number one, congratulations.
Uh-huh. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's like come as a surprise to me. I didn't think that it would have gotten this reception that it has, but it means a lot to me that people are really responding to it and really trying to like support it and make sure that I succeed because I haven't really felt supported for a long time in this community, and it's nice to finally have that.
Yeah, no, you've definitely been, during this past week, honestly, my feed has been full of people just not only just sharing your album, but also sharing amazing stories about working with you and how
Uh-huh.
wonderful a person you are, even
Yeah.
beyond just being a comedian. And it's not just the community who has been supporting you, but the fans, the audience have been supporting you as well, because you are the number one comedy album on iTunes right now. How does that
Well,
feel?
I was. Now I'm. Now it's There's a French Canadian musical man who dominates the Canadian iTunes charts, and he has 10 albums.
Oh,
So it's very hard to defeat him. But I was for a minute. I was for a minute. I might still be back. I haven't checked. But it's nice. It's so nice that I have that because I didn't expect that at all because my album was mostly
mm,
bought independently through
mm.
my label. So it's cool that I got to I feel like I guess have my cake and eat it too.
No, that's definitely definitely amazing. So you've been billed as the first queer Black performer to release a comedy album in Canada. How does it
Yeah.
feel to, break that kind of barrier and feel this support?
I mean, it's crazy. It's just I don't necessarily feel like it's like like I'm like, "Oh, I'm so proud of it." I'm just like, "Oh, that's kind of sad." That's sad that this country has been existed for how many years?
Mm.
And this is the first one. And it just really shows the systemic issues the Canadian industry has with people like myself.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this isn't the first time that you've broken barriers, because even before recording this album, you were very successful in creating queer space and for creating space for queer POC performers with
Uh-huh.
your groundbreaking show Ethnic Rainbow. It was hugely successful. Always sold out, sometimes multiple shows on the same weekend because there was so much demand. Sort of take us back to that comedy scene. You've sort of referenced it, of how it hasn't always been super welcoming, but how was it like back then, and what was the impetus to create Ethnic Rainbow?
Well, when I started in Canada, I remember there was only me and Martha Chavez. We were the only two queer people of color that we knew of in doing comedy in this entire country. And for years, I was just like, all I really want to do is do a show like this because I don't feel welcome in the regular comedy spaces. I don't feel welcome in the queer comedy spaces. I don't feel welcome in the POC comedy spaces. It's just like, where can I go? And there was the queer comedy boom happened like 3 years ago, and with that, so many queer comics of color popped up, and I was just like, okay, I can finally do this. I can finally like give us a place in this damn scene so that we can feel fully supported and have our own place, and people like us can see us on stage. Because I feel like when a lot of us have started, we don't have people that we can look up to model our careers after. Like, we can't be like, oh, this person did this and that, so I'm gonna do this and that, because if they can do it, I can do it. We don't have that. So that's why I created this show, and that's kind of what the comedy scene's like. Yeah, in
Yeah,
Canada, at least.
yeah. So so you created that scene, and then you've been performing, you've been quite prolific. I see you on quite a few shows, and now you're releasing your first album. Like, what was that process like? Like, what made you think now was the time, and how did you decide what material to put on the album and what order?
I don't even know. I recorded this in November. It was a really crazy show. My dog died like right before the
Oh
show.
no.
It was insane. I have just been like procrastinating on releasing this for so long and actually like fine tuning it to make sure that it's ready for release. And I haven't done that. And I finally did that like a couple of months ago. And I've just been like working through that, figuring out what goes what. I think what I really wanted to do with this album, with the material that I chose, is kind of it be like an introduction to me, and
Mm,
like show people like, oh, what is this person's world? What do they have to say? And I wanted to kind of like tell a story of like of me.
mm. So with your album, you've decided to have the first month of sales go to charity, and specifically Soy Toronto, Black Lives Matter Toronto,
Uh-huh.
and a charity called Two Spirits,
Uh-huh.
and that is until July 20th. And
Mhm.
just sort of, what was your thinking behind that? What motivated you? It's an amazing thing you're doing. So what motivated you, and how did you choose which charities the funding would go to?
What motivated me was, okay, one, I know how hard it is for me in this industry. So what is it like for people just like in the world that are dealing with the issues that I have to deal with? And we're in like this crazy time right now. It's Pride Month, and I was just like yeah, I'm like a struggling comedian, but it's just like, what can I do to make a difference? And I'm having this big moment in my career, and it's a, I guess like it's seen as like a historical moment. So it's just like, how can I use this to kind of give back? And if I can be an example to kind of like help people, maybe this will inspire other people to also start donating and doing initiatives of their own. And in terms of charities that I wanted to, I was just like, I donated the proceeds to some of the ethnic rainbow, the last ethnic rainbow show, to Soy. And I being a gay black person, there's no like historical, there's no like culture in Canada like that I know of, or like anything that like I can like go to. Like in the States, there's like all these different places that there's all these like famous like centers or whatever, like where gay black people can go to. And then in Canada there wasn't that. So then when I saw that, I was just like, oh my god, there's like something here in Canada for people like me. So okay, that. And then for Black Lives Matter Toronto, they are the ones that helped like kickstart all of this. Like in Toronto, they're the ones that protested it during Pride, and like and yeah, like helped all of this start. And then with Two Spirits, it's just like, I know how, I feel like sometimes we, like as a black person, I feel like sometimes they'll only deal with our issues and they don't deal with the indigenous community, and the indigenous community gets treated so horribly. So I can't imagine what it's like for Two Spirit people. So I was just like, oh, this seems like a really good charity. It became recommended by a colleague of mine, and I was just like, oh, I'm gonna donate to them too, because that looks good, and I want to be able to support that.
Yeah, no, it's amazing what you're saying. Not only putting your proceeds toward these three charities, but trying to inspire other people. and who you've inspired, we'll give a shout out to your record label, Howl and Roar, who are also
Yes.
matching. So that is amazing
Yeah,
for your
that's
record label
awesome.
to do. So just getting back to your album for a little bit, the title is Capricornication. How did you come up with that? Was it like, had you always known that would be your title?
No, I had been trying to come up with a title for so long. I went through so many different ideas, bringing things around. Nothing like felt like it was clicking. Even with the album cover, like I wasn't even like thinking of anything. And then I was just like, oh, like I'm a Capricorn. I feel like my album is very tells like that story. Like if you listen to my album, you'd be like, oh, this person's definitely a Capricorn. So I was just like, originally I was gonna call it Capricornia, and then I was gonna call it like Capricornation, like, oh, he's becoming a
Oh,
queen, Capricornation.
I like
But
that.
then the way that Capricornation looks, it looked like Capricornation. So
Uh,
it looked like had something to do with the coronavirus. And then my boyfriend was just like, "Why don't you call it like Capricornication?" And I was just like, "Oh, that's so good. I like that. That's like, ooh, he's a Capricorn and he's a hussy." And and I was just like, "I like that."
Yeah, it's definitely memorable, and also memorable is your album artwork. How did you work with like a local artist, or how did
No,
you come up with the concept?
this is what happened. So I was trying to figure out. Originally, I was gonna call the album "The Reclusive Chanteuse," and I was gonna do this kind of like high fashion Mugler, like kind of like animated photo. And the photo just ended up all the photos that this other artist came up with just ended up making me look like a pimp. And I did not like them. So I had to like I went on Fiverr, by the way, because I got a recommendation for somebody to use this app Fiverr that I'd never heard of before. So then I was just like, I didn't know what to do. I was trying to think of a new concept. And I remember Cristia Valiente took a this really amazing photo of me,
Mm,
and I was just like, oh, I'm gonna use that, but I'm gonna get it like I'm gonna make it. I want to do something with it.
mm,
So I went off back on Fiverr, and I was just like looking for people that were like kind of like affordable, but also like really cool.
mm.
And I found this one dude. His name was Doot Beats, and he was in Romania. And I approached him, and I was just like, "Oh, I need this. Like, I have this idea, like something spacey." And he was just like, "Yeah, yeah, 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 yeah." And he was just like very like, whatever. And then he didn't talk to me for 4 days, and I was just like, hi, like, are you working on my album? Could I see like any like drafts of it?" And he was just like, "I got you." And then like 4 days later, on the Monday, he came up with that cover, and I was just like, "Oh shit, this is amazing! This is so great!" And he tweaked it a little bit, and I was just like, "Oh
Wow.
damn, thank you, Romania."
Wow, that's amazing that
Mhm.
you went on this app. I have heard of the app, but I've never used it before. So
Yeah.
that's amazing that you found the right artist and he came up with something that you loved.
Uh-huh.
So during these I don't know how else to describe the times we're living in other than tumultuous. You've been able to use your platform in many positive ways. One of the ways I've noticed is you've been bringing attention to the history of Black people in Canada, because sometimes people only think about Black history in terms of the
Yeah.
United States. So you've had this series of tweets called Black History Lesson, and there was this one tweet specifically about Africville that got over 1.6 thousand retweets, 15,000 likes on Instagram. Like how did this come about, and how, how
What was
how
what is
yeah.
Well, I remember I saw there was this tweet from somebody who was going to be interviewed on some Canadian network, and she talked about how she wanted to talk about the Canadian issues, the Canadian talk of racism, and they were like, "We don't have time for that. We only have time for like the American stuff," and that really like annoyed me because so much stuff like part of my family is historic Black Canadian and has been in this country for hundreds of years. And I
Mm,
remember one of my grandmothers telling me about things that she's gone through in this country. And like when she was a little girl, she would go to the park, and it would be like no black people.
Mm.
So, and nobody knows about that. Like I've talked to people about it and like brought this up, and they didn't know about it, and it made me realize that like our education system um, doesn't want to acknowledge its own complacency, or not complacency, its own part in black anti-black racism and its own it's like
Mm.
I feel like we should know all of these things. Like, why don't we know about Africa? Why don't we know about Hogan's Alley? And but we know so much about people like what's her name, Anna Green Gables, and it just like makes me so angry that we as Canadians are always like, oh, we're not racist, we're so much better than America, blah 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 blah. But we are just as guilty, if not worse, because we don't talk about it. At least in America, you see movies about slavery, you see movies about segregation, you see that kind of stuff. In Canada, you don't see that.
Yeah, and how has it felt knowing that it seems like there's an appetite for this type of information,
Uh-huh.
because as soon as you started this series, people really latched on and it resonated.
Yeah, it really did. It really did. Um, I don't know. I'm glad that people are now starting to learn about this, because I noticed after that post, there was like a lot of things popping up about Africville, and people were like getting involved into the conversation. And I
Mm.
saw people sharing stuff about other instances of this happening around Canada, and it was really interesting because like the day after that happened, Doug Ford was just like, Canada does not have the same history of systemic racism as America," and I was just like, "Did you read my post?"
Yeah, Doug Ford, also the RCMP, I think at around the same time said there's no systemic racism. It's just it is really really crazy. And no, it's great that you're using your platforms to shine a light
Yeah.
on the fact that Canada is not immune from these issues of anti-black racism. Now, another thing obviously going on in the world right now is COVID-19, the quarantine. And, as a fellow stand-up comedian, I know that, like we're usually out all the time performing
Uh huh.
multiple nights, usually just interacting with tons of people. How has it been like adjusting to the quarantine with the lack of social interactions? And then how has it felt to transition your performances from live audiences to online? Like yesterday, you had a huge show on CBC Gem with Maggie Casella's We're Funny That Way. How does it feel to perform in front of a virtual audience?
Well, for the first part of the question, I get very exhausted because I'm very much like an introvert, and I get really exhausted when I have to like, go out all the time and do all this stuff. And before quarantine, I was very sick, and I just felt like completely burnt out. So quarantine has really given me the time to recharge and be able to do all of this stuff. So I'm kind of like grateful for it. I mean, I'm sad that I don't get to see as many people as before, but I'm happy that I'm getting this chill time. And then in terms of like virtual performing, I think it's kind of cool. It's like a new thing. I know some people don't like it, but it's like a new format of stand up, but I think it's really interesting because I feel like in stand up, it's like it's the stage, so people don't get to see certain things. Like I remember Maggie was talking about on the podcast I did with her that like doing weird shit with your face doesn't really hit as hard when you do stand up, but when you're doing it in video, because it's like a different platform, things like this and little things that you can do are more meaningful. And I think that's really cool because like you're doing stand up, but it's like a different art form, but it's still the same art form, and I like that we can use that.
Yeah, absolutely. So just wrapping up, I just wanted to ask you, we're recording this on Pride weekend
Hmm.
here in Toronto. And, it's the first time in many, many years that there's not an official parade. How are you going to celebrate Pride this weekend, if
I
at all?
I'm gonna be doing the virtual pride. I'm gonna be hosting the virtual pride parade.
Oh,
So
amazing.
tomorrow I'm going to host the virtual pride parade, and it sounds fun. I don't know what to expect, but it looks like a cool time, amazing time, and I have to go to Pickering to kind of deal with it, or to not deal with it, but I have to go to Pickering because there's like a studio set up there for me to kind of host it, and I'm excited to check it out and see what it's like.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So hopefully our listeners, if you're listening to this, check out the virtual Pride. That's amazing. I'll be tuning in for sure.
Thank
And
you.
just one final question, Brandon, is how else can people reach you on social media?
You can follow me at Bam Comedy One on Instagram and Twitter.
Okay, thanks again for being on this show, and congratulations on all your success.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, and listeners, we will be back with more episodes later this week, and happy Pride.
Thank you.